Welcome to the Better Two podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is Randee Dawn. She is an author who takes the mystical and music and blends them together. We talk about her books and so much more. So tune in. Hi, Randee. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure to have you because from when I was doing a little research, you wrote a book about one of my favorite shows.
Oh, and which one? Oh, Law and Order SVU. Would that be the one?
Yes, yes,
Okay, yes.
yes. How did that come about? And, Dick Wolf did the intro.
Yeah, he did the foreword and he gave us access onto the set and everything. So it depends on how granular you want to get. But so I'm an entertainment journalist. That's what really pays my bills, although we'll be here to talk about my books. Um, and I had done an interview with two people who had done the Law and Order unofficial companion. It was Kevin Courier and Susan Green. And when Susan decided she wanted to do the Law and Order SVU unofficial companion a couple of years later, Kevin wasn't interested. He moved on to something else. And she remembered our interview. She remembered that I was a big fan of the show and all of that. So she gave me a call and she was like, "Hey, do you want to co-author this with me?" And I said, hell to the yes. and but it's called the unofficial companion only because when you call something the official companion, that means that the network can get involved, all the suits get to have a say. But if you do the unofficial companion, it's kind of like, you don't get a say in this. But we were about as official as an official companion could get because Dick Wolf, the creator of the show, sort of Mr. TV, really, Susan knew him from the previous book. He gave us access. He let us go on the set for an entire week, and we got to interview everybody there. We interviewed people who had worked on the show before, writers, basically anybody who'd ever had their fingers on the show. And the book came out in 2009 when we were basically, I think it's season 12. And both of us looked at each other and said, well, we might have to do a little addendum in a couple of years because the show will go off the air, season 15. What show would possibly last longer than season 15? And here we are. I think it's now in season 26. So it's actually, our book now doesn't even cover half of the show, which is kind of astounding when you think about it. It just
That's
became this cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean it's totally wild, and of course people are still wanting Benson and Stabler to get together. Still,
I have all of the things to talk about with that too. Like that is totally a digression I am happy to go into about why that is not going to ever happen. Sorry, Benson Stabler fans.
I personally, when they didn't do it, when they had him doing the criminal organization or organized crime,
organized crime,
yeah, organized crime, when they didn't put the two together, and then they decided to move that to Peacock alone, it was kind of like, yeah, that's not happening. Just forget it now. Just move on.
What I try to tell people, if absolutely nothing else, Olivia and Elliot, who are Benson and Stabler, are named after Dick Wolf's children. So, like, I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'm just saying he'd kind of have to be looking in the other direction to probably give approval on this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why I don't think it'll ever happen. And we're probably anybody who's ever watched Cheers or Moonlighting or any of these shows where it's like, will they, won't they? And then they do. And then the show is never nearly as good. So.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. It's like you have all the anticipation of building and building and building. And then once these people get together, then what do you have?
It's I had a really good approximation a minute ago. It's kind of the romantic version of Hide the Monster in horror films, because the monster is always scarier in the horror film when you don't get to see it, right? Like the alien in Alien, you don't really see any complete version of that until almost the end of the movie. And then it's scary, but it was scarier when it was in your head. It's much more romantic when it's in your head in your fan fiction.
Oh, this is true. And I mean, when you're talking about the scary monster, I mean, Blair Witch did that beautifully because you never saw
Yep.
what was
You
coming
never
for
saw
you.
it. No, exactly. Blair Witch is one of those movies. I know that it's very controversial and people are like, nothing happened. I'm not scared. That movie, I went home and I had nightmares. I don't usually have nightmares from movies. Totally had nightmares.
And from the movie theater to my house was a wooded area. So,
Oh, good. Well, I'm originally from Maryland and not that far from where Burkittsville really is. And I'm like, I mean, I knew it wasn't real, but at the same time, it didn't matter that it wasn't real. I know those woods.
and I think when you're an author, your mind has that imagination that is built in. So you get an
Oh, yeah.
idea and you're going to run with it. If somebody has scared you just enough.
Oh yeah. You feel the thing is, I think that I feel sad for people who don't, really use their imagination very much because I find that if I don't have an answer to something or I have questions or whatever, I'll just start building the answers in my head. I'm willing to be proven wrong, but I am always like, I will just spackle that with story. I'll spackle the empty spaces and we can work on it later, whether or not that means anything. So yes, I will totally make up stuff. And that's how
So,
I got to be fiction writing, I guess.
well, yeah, I mean, I think that's any creative that has a story in their head. I mean, I started creating stories when I was a little kid. You
Hmm.
know, oh wow, I'm watching Heart to Heart. Guess what? They have a little kid now. They don't have kids. There's no way a kid would fit in their life. But suddenly, in my mind, yeah.
Exactly. The thing is, the way TV works is if that show had gone on even longer and they decided that it was a little bit tired, that is how they, revamp a show is they suddenly bring in the cute little kid, which is really not the way, they're not things to do.
Or you already have kids and you decide to bring in cousin Oliver.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I mean, that's just that's another TV trope, jumping the shark TV trope type thing that
Hmm.
just bad ideas.
So, what made you decide that you wanted to become an entertainment reporter?
I wanted to be able to pay the bills. Yeah, it didn't start out like I didn't wake up when I was 7 or 8 and be like, I want to be an entertainment reporter. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I was too scared to give the animals shots when I took an animal husbandry class. And my mom was like, well, you could become a journalist. And I was like, what is a journalist? So I was like, oh, this is interesting. I can write. I really like writing. I've written short stories since I was writing about my stuffed animals. And so writing was the thing I think I knew I wanted to do. But I was also, even at that age, I was pretty aware that writers don't make a lot of money, or very few writers actually get to the stage where they get published, much less make money. And I thought, okay, I need a real job if I'm going to actually be able to pay the bills. So I just went full force right into that. I went into high school. I got into journalism. I was, writing for the school paper. I was one of the editors. And when I went to college for College of Communication at Boston University. So it kind of just, I was glad that I had this early through line for what I wanted to do. Um, that really worked for me. And I was already freelancing by the time I was a junior, freelancing for money by the time I was a junior in college. And I started doing entertainment writing because when you're in college, the thing that they really want you to do is review movies, review TV, review, bands. And I was one of these very people who was very much touched and into and obsessed by bands and music and just the way that makes me feel. I can't write songs. I can't, I can barely play the piano. I can sing a little bit, but like I am not a musician. So for me, the way that music made me feel and the way music really got me all worked up and involved, and I was so fascinated with the lives of musicians that I thought, all right, well, that's really where I'd like to aim my passion. I mean, a lot of people do TV and film. I'm going to try and do music. So when I was in college, they send you free albums, and they were still sending albums at that point, albums, CDs, whatever. They want you to cover shows. So that's really sort of where it all got started. Was I started covering bands and musicians and just having really interesting conversations with them because although I eventually segued into television and film after I got out of college, and maybe I wasn't quite as, I'm still passionate about music, but not quite in the same way. I think once you get out of your teenager years and you're into your 20s, like you just feel a little different about new music. So in order to get work, I moved into TV and film, but I've always said that I love interviewing musicians more than anything else. I like interviewing people who are doing the creating. Not this is not meant to be a slam against actors, but most actors are reading words that somebody else wrote. They're interpreting them, but somebody else is filming them. It's not to me as much of a creation factor as say when you're the musician who wrote the songs, performing the songs. You got to do it live. You got to perform it not just in the studio but live. Like there was this whole creative aspect of it that really captured my imagination. So so although I did music for a long time and segued out of it, whenever I get a chance to talk to somebody who's been the creator of something, if you wrote the screenplay, if you wrote the book, if you wrote the song, and then hopefully performed it or in some way is involved with it in the performance aspect, those are the conversations I really love to have more than anything else. So yeah, that's it. Just kind of became this natural progression. It seems like one of those really easy things. People are like, "Oh yeah, I see you've just been a freelancer for a long time." And I'm like, "No, I did a lot of free stuff. I got paid $10 for a lot of things, if I got paid at all. I didn't. I was only 18 when I first started writing, which meant I couldn't legally go to some of these shows. So I had to find ways to get into some of the
Mhm.
shows. Um, it's a whole thing that you don't necessarily see an end goal in. I never necessarily thought, oh, I'm going to pay for my first house with all the money that I will make as an entertainment journalist. But I did manage to cobble together some full-time jobs as a journalist, and then I have been doing freelance for many years, and it's I managed to make it work. So that's kind of amazing. But
But
it's not.
I think one
Yeah.
of the things that people, whether it be a journalist or a writer, that people don't really think about is all the work that goes into it. I mean, sure, I lucked into being a disc jockey. That's a whole other story, but I lucked into being a disc jockey. And
Nice.
everybody's like, "Oh, you must get paid a lot." I was making $5 an hour, which was basically minimum wage. And when I started, they're like, "Okay, well, you're gonna have to go through this FCC thing." Okay. There was three questions I got asked. I paid
Uh-huh.
my $25 and then I was a licensed disc jockey. And
Yep.
one of the things was not cursing on air. And I'm like, okay. So, which I mean, I do get that, but it was just,
Sure.
that was like one of the main things. And I was like, so three questions, $25, and now I'm a licensed disc jockey. Okay. So that was easy. But when you look at everything else, whether it's a podcast, whether it's music, whether it's books, writing, whatever, there's a process and people don't look at everything. They look at the finished product,
Right. Right.
consume it, and then they're done.
Exactly. I think that's neat though about being a disc jockey. I mean, obviously you know about the music industry in a way that a lot of people don't. And I've had whole discussions, not you at all, but the
No.
whole payola scandals and things that were going on early on. And
But even
uh,
though this is the thing I say now, I mean, when I first started in radio, it was like 1993, and I worked at a small town radio station, which sister station was WKRP, and it was not in Cincinnati; it was in North
wait a
Reading,
minute,
Indiana.
I didn't know there was a real one. That's amazing.
Yes, it cracked me up. It's an AM station. I was just like, okay.
Wow.
But the thing about it is, so you go into radio, and the station I worked at, you could actually pick out the songs. Everything was there for you to pick out the songs, choose what songs you wanted to play. It had to
Hmm.
follow a certain format. That's fine. About a year and a half later, I went down to New Orleans and I was working for Z100. And
Hmm.
this was basically a clear channel station.
Uh,
All that was required of me was to hit a button and to talk. And that was it. If you called in for a request, I wasn't playing it. It was already picked.
yeah.
And
That's
that's
yeah.
unfortunate because I grew up listening to radio where you could call in and
Hmm.
request those songs.
Oh yeah, no, I loved that, and I was one of those people who would call in for sure. So it was such a thrill to like hear your name on the radio and the song
Mhm.
you wanted to hear and all of that stuff. I loved that. Um, Actually, while I was at Boston University, I also did some DJ work for the. We were such a small radio station. We were on carrier current, so
Mhm.
like you could hear us in the dorms, but unless you were walking by the dorm where the radio station
Yeah.
was, you could hear the BU 64. Um, but I had my very first shift when I was a freshman. It was 1 to 4 in the morning once a week. And yeah,
12,
there you go.
12, yeah. Hmm.
That's the shift you get. And then I had like an 8 a.m. class, the next day.
Yeah.
But I really loved it. And I did get a better shift eventually. But the way that it was set up at the station at that time was they had like categories. So you could pick anything in one category to play at this time of the hour. And then you had another different category and different category. And then you had like a free space to
Hmm.
play anything you wanted. And that was great because then I just go out and I'd look at the archives and be like, no, I really want to hear the deep cut off of this album or something. So that was sort of like a nice in between area. Like we're kind of programmed, but we're not totally programmed.
Right.
But I really enjoyed doing that. There's nothing I'm sure you know what this feels like. It's kind of like good sex when you do the lead up into the introduction to the song and you finish talking the beat before the song
Oh
really
yeah.
begins. Oh yeah, that feels good, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, and here's the funny. Okay, so I did not train to be a disc jockey. The closest I sang on the radio a couple of times, and when I was a kid, I ended up talking to a disc jockey for like an hour and a half on the phone, and he put me
Mhm.
on the air. I was like 10. I don't know why. I mean, when I think back, I'm like, that's kind of wrong, but now it's like it's amusing. But
Hey,
anyway, so the whole reason I got to be a disc jockey was because I won a pizza off the radio. And then I went to Musicland where the jock worked as a second job, and I talked to him, and he's
Right.
like, "Oh yeah, we became friends." And so he started showing me what to do. So by the time I go on vacation, come back, he's like, "My boss wants to meet you." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "My boss wants to talk to you." I'm like, "Okay." Strangest phone interview I've ever had because he's barely saying anything and I'm talking. I'm like, "So, do you want me to come in?" "Yeah, I'd like you to come in." "When would you like me to?" I mean, it was like I had, but I know what he was doing. He was trying to make sure my voice was right. So I go in on a Tuesday. He's like, "Okay, your first shift is Friday night." "What?" "Yeah, your first shift is Friday night." And granted, the radio station's in the middle of a cornfield in Indiana, but there was
Right.
still a good community to listen. And so he's like, "Somebody's going to be there with you." The guy was supposed to be there all 4 hours of my air shift. He left a half hour and he's like, "You're better trained than most jocks I know, so you're fine." I'm like, "Okay." So, I mean, it was trial by fire. I just throw it and go for it. That was it.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So, I mean, I enjoyed it, but yeah, it was, like you said, hitting those marks just right.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
was always, the segues were just that was the thing to do.
Yeah, and as a listener, I never liked having the whole introduction talked over. But as the disc jockey, you got to take your joys where you get them, and that was always a lot of fun for sure.
Yes, especially when you were trying to tape a song off the radio and you hear that jock just going on and on and on and on. And you're like, "Come on, I was trying to tape that." But that's as a kid. Anyway, let's go back to before we got on air, I noticed the gold record back there. So
Okay.
let's talk about that. And then we're going to segue into your books because they're about music as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. So the gold record you see here hanging on my thing. Um, so I was writing for Alternative Press magazine, which is still extant and still covers, indie music and all that, although it's been a while since I wrote for them. And I do not know why they paired me with Radiohead, but they wanted to pair me with Radiohead. And I said, great. I'd love to do a cover story on them. That's wonderful. So they gave me this cover story and they said, you're going to go not quite on the road with the band, but like you're going to go to about 3 or 4 different shows of theirs on the Eastern Seaboard because I'm based in New York, but at the time I was based in Boston. And you'll do interviews with the band. Like you'll have all, it's kind of like the Law and Order SVU thing. Like you will have all access for these couple of days. And I had never actually done that before. I can't say I was on the bus with the band because the band doesn't allow girls on the bus. It was actually sort of this rule, which is very cute and sort of, all right, fine. I can see why that might be the case. That's totally fine. But I rode on the Amtrak with them from one town to the other. I took the Amtrak, or I got to different destinations. I think it was Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and then maybe Washington, D.C. So it was like 5 different shows. And I had never been that immersed with a band before. And what was really cool was you got to see them they got to play around and do all of their stuff at the sound check. So that's a very loose version of what they're probably hoping to do. They were working through new songs that were going to be coming out. This was around the time of the Bends. This gold record is actually for the Bends, which came out in the mid '90s. But this was just before the OK Computer, which really was the thing that I think broke them. They'd been a big hit with Creep, which came off of their first album, Pablo Honey. But then the third album, OK Computer, people were like, wow, this band really has something to say. They're more than just a one-hit wonder, et cetera. The Bends is a very good album too. So we were kind of in that in-between stage. But it was really interesting to me to see how it all played out, how they hung out together, but they didn't hang out together, what a sound check was like versus the actual performance that night. Since I was seeing the same show, but over multiple nights, I got a different feeling for how they changed songs. It just gave me a real nice multi-layered look into them and their process. And I think it was really the first time I got the sense of, it's not just some guys who get together and play music. They create sort of like a new thing by coming together and playing music. You have these talented people who have their talents, but when their wires cross, they become something bigger than the individual parts. And that was really exciting to me because, like I say, they didn't necessarily hang out with each other when they weren't, and when they didn't have to be sound checking. Not that they didn't like each other; they were all friends. But you're living on the road with these people. You're in
Oh
the
yeah.
bus. You don't need to hang out with them all the time. So that was interesting to me. It was interesting to me when I interviewed one of them, and like a roadie or somebody walked in a note from a mom who was standing outside, and she's like, my daughter and I drove all this way to the show, and I see that there's no more tickets. Do you think you can help us out? We've come all this way from Ohio or something. And he's like, yeah, just put her on the list. And, just seeing them as individual people was really interesting. Um, and they were very kind. The last person I spoke to was Tom York, who's the singer, and he was. I think he's much more out of his shell now, but he was very, very shy, very, very quiet. And when I interviewed him, we literally walked through this group of fans. It was right after the Philadelphia show. And we walked through this group of fans, and like some of them were leaning over and smelling his hair. And it's fascinating to see that interaction. And I said to him, doesn't that creep you out a little bit? And he's like, no, that's one of the only times anybody touches me. And I'm like, oh my God. So we go next door, and it's a bar, and he's never had a tequila shot. And I'm like, we're going to do a tequila shot. So we do a tequila shot, and you just kind of build on that conversation. So anyway, it was a really great time. I loved it. And I wrote the article, and I love having enough space in a music magazine to really go into depth. I'm a big fan of what has been known as new journalism. I don't like to put myself in the story, but I like being able to write a real life narrative in a sort of not fictionalized, but kind of prosaic way, as though it is a story that you're reading, not just here's this band, here's their new album, this is what you got to know. So I had like 3,000 or 4,000 words to do that, and I was thrilled. And so the article comes out, and the band, I guess, likes it so much that I get a call from the PR people saying they want to send you a thank you. And I'm like, that's lovely. I've never had that before. That's terrific. Maybe it'll be like a signed album or something. It was this.
Nice.
And it has my name on it. And it's one of my proudest achievements, honestly.
That's awesome. That is awesome. What you said though about the smelling thing, I mean, I had a guest who had worked with another artist that was
Mhm.
more well known than him. And
Mhm.
he had said that people would ask him what that other artist smelled like. And I'm just like, I've met famous people. I've met the said person in question. I stood next to him. I can't tell you what he smelled like. It didn't even resonate to
No.
think about. Oh, I just know he didn't stink. I mean, that's about the best thing I can
Well,
say, but
I will say, having out with musicians, some of them just choose not to bathe very often.
yes.
Then you know what they smell like.
Well, I mean, if you read the Tom or Nikki Sixx's book, The Heroin Diaries,
Uh,
7 days with no shower, doing heroin and screwing somebody and no toilet paper, that is the most disgusting, vile thing I have ever heard. But that is in his book, and it's just like,
yeah.
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
I'm in the middle of Keith Richards's life,
Oh,
which is that autobiography. And it's really interesting. I can't say that I'm a Rolling Stones expert, but I do love reading rock biographies, Hammer of the Gods, for Led Zeppelin, that kind of stuff. Nobody Here Gets Out Alive, The Doors. Even what was the one that trying to think of her name. Anyway, she's just like sort of the most famous of the groupies. I can't think of her name, but she wrote a
um,
biography also. She was I'm blanking on her name. Anyway, I love reading those kind of things. I haven't read one in a long time, and I'd heard good things
Pamela
about
DeBar,
Pamela. Thank you very much. I'm like, I know she was married to somebody that I know.
Michael
Um,
DeBar.
Pamela DeBar, and yeah, what is it called? It's I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, but Keith Richards' book is really good. It's a massive tome. I mean, it's like 800 pages or something ridiculous. I'm on page 600. But it's so interesting. He has some real interesting insights. He talks about constructing the music, which you don't see nearly enough about in biographies or autobiographies. I don't know if he had a ghostwriter. He probably had somebody, but I feel like this is very genuine coming from him. It doesn't feel like somebody has simply reconstructed his life. And he was talking about, for example, one time his record for not going to bed while doing drugs and recording was like 9 days. He just collapsed after 9 days. So yes, when we're talking about stinky people, I'm sure he was a little stinky by that point. Um, but yeah, I'm really interested in what he has to say, and I'm loving the story and everything. So it's nice to be immersed in that world again. As weird as that world is, that is a very different world. The 70s and the 80s for the Rolling Stones, 60s, 70s, 80s, very different than the pop world we have now, for
Oh
sure.
yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to get Live Aid, so I got
You
to
were at Live Aid? Eee!
I won a radio contest and I ended
Right.
up getting to go. So, I mean, when I look at Live Aid and the mass, the mass crowd that was there, and yes, there was cocaine all over the damn place but that was the 80s. But I don't think that you could undertake such a show now and have it be the same. Yeah, you can have a big concert, you have all the festivals. I'm not saying it's different.
Yeah, it is. Any institution, if it's around long enough, it starts to calcify because you get all the people who've broken all the rules, and we tried to fix those rules, and now they're going to try and find different loopholes and all that. So you end up with like a million zillion rules, most of which don't even make any sense. Um, and you also becomes more and more corporatized because people think they can make money off of it. And I don't know that there's a very small number of people in both publishing and in the music industry who have actually made money, and there's everybody else who thinks that they can make money. So where
Yeah.
we are right now with music is there still is a thriving indie scene. I do find some really cool music through ways that I wouldn't expect to, but it's so corporatized now in a way and it's so protected, and everybody's kind of in a bubble, and you get eight people writing one song, and I'm like, I know that can work and that can be a good song too, but I really like the singer songwriter stuff where somebody is really just pouring his whole heart. I think there's a reason why people are responding to the Bob Dylan biopic that's out now. Timothy Chalamet, of course, is always worth watching. But the idea that you have this guy who really wrote these songs, and then he's interacting with Pete Seeger, who also was a great songwriter, I think that almost is alien to younger generations where they're just used to it being faceless people and producers and all getting credit on a record that's used a million samples from somewhere else. It just feels like that's a salad as opposed to a meal.
They used to be authentic, and now we have this whole. I mean, Milli Vanilli would have succeeded with no problem now, but Milli
Oh yeah.
Vanilli back then. But you're talking about rules. Well, here's the funny thing about the Live Aid thing.
Mm-hmm.
So my friend actually was the caller that got through. I got through, but I wasn't the right number. She was younger than me. I was 3 months shy from my 17th birthday.
Nice.
Her mother signed off for her to go, and I
Mm-hmm.
was her guardian. Think about that. Legally, I am not cannot be anybody's
No,
guardian, but I
no.
was her guardian.
Yep. No, no, no. I see all these things on TikTok where people talk about, the feral nature of the Gen Xers. Um, it was a different time. And I'm not saying it was a bad time. I think that was a better time in a lot of ways. We just had a certain amount of freedom.
Well, the funny thing I find is like 3 days later, I was going to go see a band in New Orleans, and they were they went after the show. I knew where they were staying and everything, and they were going to this club that opened its doors at midnight called the Dungeon.
Oh,
And me and my friends walked over there, and
uh,
my other friends were kind of tomboyish, and I walked over there. I'm in this tight dress and everything and a jacket, and I'm scared to death to go in. I'm three
mhm.
months shy. Now I think about this. Looking back, I'm sure I could have got in. They wouldn't ask for my ID, but I'm something most likely prevented me and was smart that I didn't go in. But at the time, it's like, I can't go in there. I'm going to get in trouble. And then what?
Right, exactly. And then everything will be wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll just not go. But I mean, I think that's funny because Gen X, yeah, at times we were very much the rebels because
Mhm.
we didn't have all the rules.
We
But
weren't
yeah,
supervised nearly as much.
no, no. It was the whole, okay, I'm going to work, you're gonna stay home, and I'll call and check on you. I will call, hang up, and then when I call back right away, then pick up.
Yeah. Yep. The
Okay.
signals. Yeah.
Yes.
You
Hmm.
know, that's how I grew up too. It was like nobody's allowed to come in the house, but there were a lot. I think a lot of my friends had even fewer rules than I did. But just the idea that you came home to an empty house, and my younger brother would come home to me, and we were in charge for like 3 or 6 hours. It was not quite Lord of the Flies or anything, but it could have been.
Oh, I know. I get it.
Yeah.
But and so let me ask you this. When you talk about I know you're writing your book, the book that's
Yeah.
coming out, which is The Only Song Worth Singing. That's set in Ireland. So what made you decide to set it in Ireland as opposed to the US?
So it only partially actually is set in
Okay.
Ireland. We start off there, so that's a totally legitimate question to ask. it starts off in Ireland with this group of young boys who become friends through music, and then we skip ahead to their first tour in the United States in the 1990s. So they've been friends all this time. They've become a band. There's been some ups and downs, which you learn throughout the books. We do flashback a bit to Dublin and beyond, but most of the book is taking place on like sort of the tail end of their first American tour. So kind of like with that Radiohead, we're in Boston, we're in Philadelphia, we're in Boston, we're in Baltimore, it ends up, the last show is being done at the University of Maryland. Being from Maryland, I sort of try to base a lot of my stuff in Maryland when I can. And so they've had this tour, but it's in the last couple of weeks of the tour, because there's a reason why the tour gets put on hold that you find out in the book. When they encounter these very strange people who turn out to be Fae, the Irish Celtic Fae, who have shown up for various reasons that are revealed, and make their lives sort of upend their lives, make them very difficult and hellish in those last few weeks. And it was a way for me to really look, throw in a lot of that backstage, being on the bus, being in a strange place with not too many people who you actually know or can trust. I wanted to emphasize on their friendship also, but the fantasy element is, so the main character that kind of grabbed me and said, all right, let's see if we can do this, is I was reading a book by Yeats. So W.B. Yeats, the poet, also was very into folklore and was kind of one of these guys who would go around the country and collect old stories from the rural folk, which is something that I think his name is, I want to say Art Maddox maybe had done in the United States, where he collected a lot of US-based folklore and recorded songs and all of that kind of thing. So Yeats was part of this Irish Renaissance from the 1910s, 1920s, where they were trying to, even though he was part of the gentry, he was part of the sort of bourgeoisie, upper middle British class, they were trying to revive Irish cultural areas, the language, the stories and all that. So he had put together this book, and in the book, it's not just a collection of short stories about the Irish Fae. He actually classifies them in different sections. So there's like the solitary fairies, the trooping fairies. And there was one fairy that I had never heard of before. I think most of us can probably say we know what a leprechaun is, or we have an idea. We might even know what a banshee is. But there was this fairy in there I'd never heard of before, called the Leanhaun She. Now, my Irish is not good. I do not speak Irish. That's what I think it's pronounced. It's spelled many ways. But the Leanhaun She is known as the fairy mistress. And she's kind of the muse. She inspires the poets. At the same time, however, she also turns out to be a bit of a succubus. So she will inspire you, but she will steal your life as she inspires you. So this is why, as Yeats said, all the poets die young. They write great stuff. They are the candle that burns at both ends, and then they gutter out in relatively early years. He himself lived a lot longer than your average poet, but think Byron, think great poet Dylan, the old Dylan, not new Dylan. Anyway, so I loved this idea because I thought, well, who are the modern day poets? Yes, of course we have poets, but who are sort of the modern day poets that I could write about? How do you marry the thing that you've just really been fascinated by with the thing what if these fae, there's other fae, come over, there's 3 of them, and one of them is the fairy mistress, and so she sort of attaches herself to somebody in the band. Once you've attracted the attention of the fae, how do you get rid of them before they kill you, right? So that's kind of the focus of the book. That's really how we bring this friendship around, how we learn how these 3 really stick together, how they conquer their own version of the fae who have come to change their lives, and how they figure out, or maybe don't, I'm not giving anything away, to free themselves of this fairy mistress, this Leanhaun She. That's what the only song worth singing is. That's the story anyway. There's a lot of other things in there about claiming your own name, understanding, reconciling who you are and where you came from, One of our main characters has been told his whole life that he believes the wrong stuff because he believes folklore. He has to believe the church. He has to believe church teachings. He's been brought up by monks. Um, so there's this sort of unlearning process that he needs to go to before he can become the person who helps his friend. So that's another part of the book. And throughout it all, I was really hoping to just convey what it felt like when you really go to a really kick-ass concert and you're just, I don't want this thing to end. I'm dripping in sweat. They haven't played the song I want to play. They're going to play it. I mean, there's been bands that I've gone to that have just got me, I'm just vibrating when I leave because I have to see that again. I have to see that again. And you'll chase that feeling
Oh, yeah.
anywhere you can once you find a band like that you
Yeah.
love. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Yes, I do. I've
Yeah.
there's a band or two that I've done that with. So yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's the only song worth singing. It's actually a story I started writing in the 90s. So if it feels like there's verisimilitude to it, I didn't have to do a whole lot of back research because the initial drafts were things that I was capturing what, Boston felt like in the 1990s and what these other places looked like or felt like or what would have been there. And then the draft just kind of sat around for a long time. I'm a late bloomer when it comes to getting my fiction shown to anybody because I walked this weird line between I'm too scared to show it to anybody because they might not like it, and this is clearly perfect the way it is. It doesn't need to be revised or anything. It's a weird dichotomy. I don't know if everybody has this or not, but I could feel I was not ready to receive criticism for many years,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, it's I would just hear it. Whatever somebody would say, if it was somewhat negative, I'd be like, "Oh, clearly they hate me and they hate my writing, and I should never do it again," kind of thing. You just go from one end of the spectrum to the other. So I just didn't really show my writing around a lot, and I just let it sit around. I'm like, "Man, I'll do something with this eventually. Maybe we'll see. Maybe it'll do something else." And what it started out with and what it is now is kind of actually they're not that far apart, really. I've got more layers in there certainly, and the years that I've lived since I've been able to put more texture into it. And then there's also this sort of revisiting of what Yeats did in the first place. There's this there are scholars who are very much of the belief that Yeats kind of maybe sort of invented the Lanehunshi, like he didn't go to all these people and get these stories. He sort of maybe made that one up because there are elements of the muse who steals from you throughout almost all folklores. I mean, throughout the world. So it's not as though there was never anything like this before. But if you try and do deep research pre 1920s on this, you just don't come up with very much. I went to the University College of Dublin and did some research in their folklore department. I'm like, I'm really not finding anything. Am I not looking in the right places? And it turns out there's very much this thought that that book that I really loved, where he collected all those stories, that some of those stories may have just been things that people kind of made up on the fly. It's like, oh yeah, there's this guy here. He's buying me beer. Sure. I got lots of stories for you. Sure, sure. And there's even, not from me, I'm not getting that deep into it because this is not my place to talk about it, but there is this sense of some level of what people call today cultural appropriation. He was not of the rural Irish. He was not poor. He was not growing up necessarily with this stuff as part of the ether, right? He came from a more wealthy family. I just watched James Joyce's The Dead the other day, and there's a reference they would make to the Irish who were a little bit too friendly with the British as being West Britons. And I could see him being perhaps called that, despite all the other wonderful, great things he did. I mean, he co-founded the Abbey Theater, very much, part of that Renaissance. But there's a sense from some scholars these days that maybe he might not have been the best person to do this, or he was sort of doing it for his own benefit as opposed to really everybody else's benefit. And who knows? This is a long discussion to be had, probably in a more, by scholars who are more educated than I am on this.
But
But I did work that into the book a little bit too.
but that's good. I mean, here's the thing. It's like we look back at people, we have now in certain cases taken the veil, move the curtain back and seen
Mhm.
Oz, because it's like now you have to look at people in a real concept. I mean, I've talked about this before. That the 17-year-old girl is, so the band is outside. They are at this hotel bar, and it's an outdoor bar, and all these girls are standing there just screaming. And yes, my girlfriends are over there, and I walk across the street because I'm just over it. And I
Mhm.
know that's like really weird for a 17-year-old, but I'm just like, this is ridiculous. I walk over, there's a chain link fence there. And I'm looking in this chain link fence because, yeah, instead of burglar bars, they had a chain link fence over the store window. And the bodyguard screams really loud at the top of their lungs, they're people, not animals. And that left such an impression on me because
Mhm.
here I am looking through this window.
Mhm.
And it really, in any dealings I've dealt with celebrity, it's like I've always treated them like a normal person because they are just normal people. But the
Mhm.
problem is, and no offense to what you do for a living, it's like PR creates a narrative, journalism creates a narrative of these people and how wonderful they are, and we take them and put them on a pedestal.
Mhm.
And that can be done with anybody. I mean, my in-laws did that when I first met my first husband. They're like, we prayed to God for you to send someone to your husband and the girls. Okay, well, I am up here all the way now. No one has ever made me feel this good. My parents certainly didn't make me feel this good. This is great.
Right.
But at a certain point, the hype goes. And then the downfall comes. And that's where I think we lose track that, yeah, they're just normal people. They do
Mhm.
everything that we do. They just have more money and a cool job.
Well, that I think it's the cool job part that really captures people too, because yes, they are ordinary. They are people just like us. I don't want to say ordinary people because to me they have sort of an extraordinary talent, so
Right,
that makes it a little bit different. Um, but they are doing it in an unreal and an unusual, an elevated platform, right? So
right,
their job puts them into a place where things are not normal for the rest of us, right? They're what I really enjoyed so much about doing all of my entertainment journalism was seeing those real person moments. I loved looking at whatever books they were reading. So I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Or I loved seeing just sort of quick moments the way they're not necessarily being observed.
right.
There was going back to the Radiohead thing for a moment. One thing that still sticks in my head that is just a delightful free moment is when Tom York. We're in this small club in Washington D.C. and he has his guitar. He's off of the stage and he ends up just chasing somebody around the room. He's carrying his guitar like this, running around the room, and it's like you just see him grinning and he looks like he's having the best time of his life. And I love seeing all those little intimate inside things that says, yes, these are regular people doing extraordinary things.
Right.
And I also, one thing I would love to point out is that one of the things I wanted to do with this book was again portray them as regular people, but people who are kind, not necessarily assholes, right? I mean, can I say that here?
Yes, you can say, you can curse.
Okay, good. I just
I
want to
drop
make
the
sure.
F, I drop the F bomb several times usually, but that's
Um, yeah, I think when you watch movies and TV shows about when then they have pop stars or they have musicians or they have rock stars, they're always just such jerks. It's like they don't know how to behave around normal people, or they're just gonna, essay whoever they happen to come across, and that's their whole goal in life, or they're just here to do more drugs. And the fact is, most of the people I was meeting were these young bands who were coming to America for the first time, who were just blown away by how big it was. They'll always say, like, I never thought it was this big. I knew it was big. I didn't know it was this big. Um, who don't really know anybody, who are just really happy to find somebody who's willing to talk with them. I had long, long chats off the record with band members, and it wasn't about like, oh, and then we're going to go have sex. It was just like we would just have long conversations, and I loved seeing that realness. And it always bugged me when you watch these procedural TV shows where the band member has somehow gotten into trouble or done something horrible. And I really wanted to have a very human look at these people who were, again, in an extraordinary situation, made more extraordinary by having the fairy, the fairy element chasing after them.
the very first book I wrote is My Days with the Dark Muse, and I will say this: I have been told I was told several times over, there's no way in hell you will ever redeem this man. He is the typical narcissistic, drugged out rock star who has blown up his life. However,
Mhm.
there's a twist. It's not really all real, but yes, and it's been out since 2019, so that's why I give it away.
No spoiler alert.
But I mean, I was told there's no way you could redeem him. There's no way in hell you will ever redeem him. All right, fine. So I write another book, and then I write the next book in the series, and everybody's like, Team Nigel, I love Nigel. Nigel's. I'm like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think that if you write, I don't believe that any, well, maybe not any, but I think most characters who are portrayed as, the antagonists, the villains, whatever, they feel they have three dimensions when you write them in a certain way that makes them understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Like people can do horrible, horrible things, but still also be somebody that you can understand why they did those things. And as a writer, if you can put some motivation in there, some reasoning behind this, people will appreciate that character far more than if they're just sort of, snidely whiplash. Ooh, what can I do next to do that's horrible, right? And obviously, they found out with your character that there's more levels to him. Even my fairy mistress character, who I call Shiri, um, she doesn't seem like she would be redeemable, and I'm not trying to redeem her necessarily, but there are some conversations that the characters have at different points where they're just like, look, this is how she was made, this is the thing that she does. She didn't offer you something that you didn't take, you didn't accept. And it's not that, and I'm trying to find ways to sort of say, look, she didn't come in here to twirl her mustache. She came in here because this is her purpose, and you accepted her purpose, and you accepted the deal that you made, and now you want to get out of this deal. So who actually is really the bad guy here? So I think that it's important to have antagonist characters, but also ones that you can see how we got to this place. They didn't just pop up out of the ground.
Well, and that's with the book that I wrote.
Mhm.
It starts off where he's in studio and he ODs, and we go off into this whole adventure of we go from 1984 to suddenly 1997,
Oh,
and
okay.
we're viewing his journal, his personal dialogue, internal dialogue of him being the big bad rock star to his let me clean up my act to his once again downfall to waking up and realizing, wait a second, none of that was real. And that's the thing though. It's like I when I sat down to write that book, it wasn't that I sat down to write that book.
Hmm.
I my husband had started dialysis, my late husband, and I was at Barnes and Noble and I'm like, okay, I need to do something. I can't my 30-year novel. Brings me to that what you were saying about your book that you haven't. So I had a 30-year novel that I had not done anything with except tinker, and I kept adding and changing the story, and so Nigel comes to me and says, I got an idea for you. I'm like, okay. Do this as a marketing ploy. Write my journal out. It'll be great. I'm like, okay, fine. So I created a blog with this journal, and I started having rehab centers follow me.
Really?
And I thought to myself, if they think this is real, then I might as well turn it into a book. And that's what
Yeah.
I did because it was not my intention to write this book. But
Right.
that was one of those things where it's like when I was done finally, because I was at Barnes and I got to know these people, they were getting ready to close that location. They're like, we have one more new writers' night. If you can get your book done and published, you can be part of that. So it gave me something to motivate me to finally say, okay, I'm going to publish it. I'm not going to worry about what people are going to say,
Right. That's awesome.
which isn't the best practice. I admit I made a lot of mistakes, but
But that's how you learn, right? I
mhm,
mean, you learn when you do the mistakes, and if you never do the mistakes, you don't learn. So, but that
no.
was that was one of the things I had to learn too, because when I said I was very critique averse,
Mhm.
it's not until somebody cuffs you around a little bit that you get a sense of like, oh, this is meant to improve the work. This is not about my identity as a human being, right?
Right. And that's the scary thing with reviews because sometimes it's like you get a review and somebody doesn't explain it or they just leave you stars, and you're like, well, what was your reasoning? Please do tell me.
Mhm.
But I think you have to develop that tough skin. It goes back to the critique. You have to develop that tough skin. And I think being Gen X, you didn't get that tough skin,
Mhm.
because if you told your parents something, they're like, I don't have time for you. You go cry, you go deal with your own stuff. Bye bye. And so you didn't get chance. You're like, oh, you're just being too sensitive. There was nothing called stress management. There was nothing to tell you how to handle certain things.
Yeah. No, you figured it out on your own, or you didn't figure it out.
Exactly. So I think that's why when it comes to criticism, it's like, okay, because if you were in a sports competition, you got ragged on for being a loser. There was
Yep.
no, oh, here's a trophy to keep you happy. No,
There's no participation trophies for
no.
tennis.
So I think that's why it's like when it came to, oh, I have to put myself out there. I mean, I remember giving my early writing to people and be like, just watching, hovering not over their shoulder, but just kind of glancing over at them. So, what did you think? I mean, it
Right.
was the whole nerve-wracking thing of, is it okay? Is it good? Is it? And I think over time as an author, you develop that. You just
Yeah.
develop that. I can't please everybody. Somebody's going to love my book. Somebody's going to hate my book. And the best thing I would tell a new author is, if you are so worried about it, go look at your favorite author.
Mhm.
Go on Goodreads, look at your favorite author, and I guarantee you they're going to have 1-star ratings just as much as they'll have 5-star ratings.
I got to tell you, I know it does take a certain amount of willpower, but I don't read rating. I don't read reviews basically. If I want to feel good about myself, I might find a 5-star or something like that, and just like, I can read that, pat. But in general, I don't read reviews because I heard something a long time ago that said reviews are for readers, not
Mhm.
for authors. I'm not going to get my best critique out of somebody writing 100 words and whether or not they like the book, right? So, like, I just sort of told myself early on, do not do that because I also know me, and that the one negative thing is the thing that will stick with me, whereas all the nice stuff will be like, yeah, whatever. I have a negative thing over here I have to now hyper focus on. So just knowing me, I thought, okay, we're not going to read those negative writings. I saw the one negative one I remember seeing from my previous books. I had a book that came out in 2022. Um, was sort of, I think the line, this is on an Amazon review, was something like, I don't understand what the purpose was. I'm like, okay, whatever. What are you going to go with that? That's fine. And I just decided I don't want to have that stuff rattling around in my head and making me not a better writer for the better.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, I realized one of the most recent reviews I got was a book that I've been told by several different people I couldn't put it down. I couldn't put it
mhm,
down.
mhm.
And so this review was like was my first 2-star review, and the person's like, "Yeah, I just loved Wes and Jen, but the plot was just ridiculous." Okay, but everybody else has told me I couldn't put it down. This was just had me on the edge of my seat. Okay, and so
Yeah,
it took me a moment, and I'm like, you know what? You can't please everyone, and I think that's the important lesson there.
no, you can't. You can't. I mean, people who are best sellers don't please everyone. People who sell millions and millions of copies don't please everyone. I've never read a Colleen Hoover book in my life. I'm okay with that.
Hmm.
It's like, that's great. I'm glad that this is one of the things that I learned from music. So, when you are really passionate about music and you're a teenager, there's this weird thing that makes you feel like you have to know everything. You have to have heard everything. You have to know everything, and you have to categorize everything. This is good. This is bad. This is just stuff I haven't heard yet. Right. And the more mature you get and the more stuff you listen to, the more you realize that it is perfectly fine to say, this is good, but it is not for me. Right?
Hmm.
There is a lot of wonderful music out there that is not for me. And that's okay. I have tens of thousands of songs on my iPod right now, right? Or my iPod, my smartphone. This is how old I am. I have an iPod. Tens of thousands of songs. I could start listening now and not be done for months. So that means that I will never listen to all the music that's out there. And there's no reason why I need to yuck anybody else's yum because that's not for me. And I like to think about that with books. If I'm going to do a review of a book and I do a list of like all the books that I finished this year, in general, the review that I do is here's a brief summary of the book. Here's what it reminds me of. I might have a brief mention in there, like whether or not it was worth my time. But for the most part, I don't need to know everybody's opinion.
No.
I don't know that because my opinion is not going to necessarily help you if it's really a book for you. And that's how I just feel about opinions in general. You can say things like these people don't know how to act out of a paper bag, or this book is riddled with typos or something. Those things are things you can say, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be a problem for anybody
But isn't that the statement that, I know you know it, opinions are like assholes, everybody's got one.
Everybody's got one. Yep, exactly.
And I think
Uh,
that social media has opened up the gates for opinion, and that's why it's like,
yeah, I mean, I feel like, I use social media as much as anybody else because I need to get the word out about my book.
right.
I do like connecting with old friends. But I was thinking about this the other day that without getting into the political situation that we are in right now, there is an argument to be made that not everybody's voice needs to be heard. As a journalist, I get that there was a lot of gatekeeping. There's the whole mainstream media aspect of things. I get that the corporatization of journalism and media is very problematic. The answer to that, however, was not give everybody a microphone. Because most people, they don't have anything to say, but they feel like even if they don't have anything to say, they have to say something. We have not quite trained ourselves as a civilization to know when not to talk or when not to have an opinion, when to just take it in. And there's so many people who have felt like they have to say something and as loudly as possible. And that's supposed to be as valid as somebody who has done, years of research or talked to all the experts or gotten all the different sides of things. That's not the same thing,
No.
right? So yeah, but I think that's part of the reason where we are right now is that we told everybody's voice is equal. And on the one hand, yes, if you have something to say, you should be able to elevate it and have it heard. But most people just don't have anything worth saying.
Well, and very much like your book, you talking about doing the research about finding out about this ferry.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't do research. I mean, when I do my books, yeah, because they're set in the 80s and 90s, I go back and I have Four Doors travel books because I'm not going to find necessarily a restaurant that might have been there in the 80s that's not there now.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, most people won't do research. They will take whatever somebody's thrown up on the internet, and here we are. It's the truth. Why?
Yeah.
And I think that has to do with the lack of critical thinking, that people don't take the time. They want the answer and that's it. And that must be right because it's on the internet. No, that's not right.
Exactly. I mean, I still remember that cartoon about, honey, it's time to come to bed. No, somebody's wrong on the internet. I must talk to them. You know, someone's always going to be wrong on the internet. You can go out in your neighborhood and somebody's going to be wrong, right? Like you can't argue with everybody. You just need to be able to, like you said, do the critical thinking, do the critical questions, have skepticism. When somebody gives you a piece, one of my favorite websites is Snopes. You know Snopes,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Snopes is fantastic because it's kind of this warehouse for clearing out all of the junk that pops up, but people still post the junk. And
Hmm.
I confess I have a lesser opinion of people who don't make that at least that one quick step of saying, does this seem credible? Is it credible? And they just post it up anyway. I just saw the other day, I saw this morning, somebody I know on my feed who posted that stupid thing again that said, I'm on Facebook and I do not give you
Oh
permission
God,
to use
yeah.
any of my writing. It's like, that's at least 10 years old by now. How can you have that as a thing that you're passing along? I mean, what? And I feel that way. This is another discussion probably entirely, but I also feel that way about people who use AI. There are lots of things you can do that are good with AI, but if you're using AI in a creative way to publish things, people who just post, oh, this is such a cute picture of a kitty that I saw. The kitty is surfing. Isn't that amazing? It's like there's so many things wrong with that. I don't even know where to start. And I now have a slightly lesser opinion of you because you thought this might be real or you didn't care, and now you've shared it with the world.
I will admit that there was a time when, about a year ago, when I was playing around Canva with AI, I was not going to do anything with it, but I had put in some parameters. And it's like there's a guy with a motorcycle, but yet the motorcycle's part of him.
Yeah,
Or the
it's
woman's
like
got three
centaur.
arms and stuff. So yeah, I did post some of that because it's like this is so ridiculously screwed up, and their
Yeah.
eyes were like not really centered right, and their whites of their eyes were a little.
Yeah.
So the stuff that it was screwed up, I posted because it was like, yeah, you think AI is so great? Look at this. It was ridiculous. But yeah,
And
that's.
I do think there's a place for it too.
Mhm.
Um, but there's a meme that goes around that says, I want AI to do things like my laundry or clean the dishes so that I have time to write, not do the writing so that then I have to do the laundry and the dishes, right? Like, the first time I stepped into anything really AI was for the book that's coming after, The Only Song Worth Singing.
Mhm.
Uh, my publisher was like, "Do you have ideas for the cover?" And for the only song worth singing, I had given them ideas, but I had gotten photos from the internet and just sort of said, "Here's like some character inspiration and that kind of stuff." And I thought, well, that we had some issues with coming up with that. Let me see if I can just say, "This is what I'm looking for." And I went into I think it's called Leonardo or something, and I said, "This is kind of what I'm looking for, but obviously not to copy paste." And it did help me give them some like dream board
Right.
or inspo images to just riff off of. And so that second book, that cover came together much more clearly because it gave the artist something to bounce off of, but not to interpret, not to
Right,
like
right.
color on top of. So I think that there are ways to do it. It's just that it's fruit of the poison tree at this point. So much creative AI has stolen from writers and artists. And then there's the whole environmental impact. I mean, if you do any digging, you see that it just takes an enormous amount of water to keep these servers running and
Yeah.
cool. And we're in a climate situation where water is not as available as it used to be, even if it comes out of your own tap. So I just feel like I'm not arguing with these people anymore. I'm just blocking them.
Yeah, I mean there's no sense in arguing because that's the one thing I realized because my husband passed in 2020 and I used to try to correct people as far as go to Snoops, do this, da da da. And I just realized it's like you might as well, you're wasting your energies trying to rectify a problem that they're not going to hear you. And I think that's the one thing when you have people that are emboldened, they're not listening. They want to be right, and that's it. And that's where the unfortunate thing is because instead of all of us getting along and actually working for a common good, we're up in arms about things. And to your point about AI, the meme going around about AI doing your housework and everything, I think it was Picard, the TV series Picard, and they showed Data's origins
Uh-huh.
and how he basically the robots that were made like Data were basically subservient slaves.
Hmm.
And that's all they did was housework and everything, and they were treated very poorly
Hmm.
because people were just like, "Well, we rule over you."
Hmm.
But and then they revolted, of course. And it's
Right.
like that's the one thing I find funny. It's like when they talk about AI, it's like, "Hi, did you not see War Games? Did you not see Terminator? Did you not see any of these things?"
Right. Right. And we'll have to tell each other that it's not Skynet. It's not Skynet. Not
Not
yeah.
yet, anyway. I did want to talk real quick about Tune In Tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
What was that all? I mean, it's with reality TV, and so I take it you have a feeling about reality TV as well.
Well, so Tune In Tomorrow is kind of whiplash for The Only Song Worth Singing, right? I mean, The Only Song Worth Singing is not intentionally funny. It's not meant to be a funny book, okay? It's supposed to be me trying to be a serious, telling the story. And it actually was written long before Tune In Tomorrow. But with Tune In Tomorrow it's humorous, it's pop culture, and it's a fantasy. And it's about a reality TV show run by mythical creatures for mythical creatures, but starring humans.
Okay.
And so it's meant to be backstagey and how the sausage gets made, but in a more humorous way because it started out actually not as about a reality TV show. I worked at a soap opera magazine for 5 years. And, and I initially wrote it as, look, what are the true, if you're an immortal creature and you're going to watch TV or whatever, you want a show that's just not going to go off the air after a year, right? You want a story that's a story without end, as they describe soap operas. And I thought, okay, I want to, what would mystical creatures, what would magical, mystical, mythical creatures watch if they were going to watch anything? Well, they're as fascinated with humans and our little mundanities, like, ooh, writing a check, or why do you need to drive a car? Tell us about
Mhm.
these things. What is adultery? It's a bit like the aliens kind of taking a look at what TV, what our lives are like, and then turning it into TV. And I thought, when my editors at Solaris said, we want the book, but we don't think enough people watch soap operas anymore. And I'm like, okay, you can have that opinion, but anyway, we don't think people watch soap operas anymore. Can you do reality TV instead? I was like, sure, reality TV shows, a lot of them are basically modern soap operas, the
Mhm.
Kardashians, Selling Sunset, not the competition shows quite so much, but the ones that are basically the Real Housewives. I mean, that is a modern soap opera.
Mhm.
So it was very easy to just sort of graft on reality TV to this because reality TV is very scripted. I'm not saying that they're walking around with an actual
No,
script or
but
sides, but they are structured into that story as much as anything else. that you might see on TV. So that was actually fairly easy to do. And I liked being able to actually put that into the story where our main character is like, oh, yeah, that's interesting that they're doing this because reality shows are basically soap operas and all of that.
Hmm.
Um, so that was a really fun book because I got to be very slapsticky and silly. And coming up with that idea of what TV mythical creatures would watch gave me a bigger idea about it also. And although Tune In Tomorrow is a standalone book, there is another book that will be in that universe of mythical TV that's coming out later this year in the fall. It's called We Interrupt This Program,
Okay.
and that's going to also be out through Solaris. So
Nice.
maybe I'll come back and talk about that then.
That'd be cool. That would be very cool. Which I do have to say. So you watch soap operas, obviously. Um,
Hmm.
did you watch Days of Our Lives?
I was more of an ABC gal. I was a
Okay.
General Hospital fan, but my mom was a huge Days of Our Lives fan. So I kind of knew parts of that, and I certainly saw it while I was covering shows at the
The
magazine.
only reason I asked was, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about when a show should just stop. And that was when Marlena was possessed.
Possessed, yeah.
Everybody was talking about it, but come on, that was just over the top ridiculous.
Well, here's the thing. When I was doing all the stuff for Tune In Tomorrow, I wrote several articles for, it used to be called Tor.com. The Tor, the publishing house, has their own website. It's now called Reactor. But I wrote these like listicles of all of these different times soap operas basically went into sci-fi, fantasy, or horror mode. And there's more than you might think. I mean, Days of Our Lives, prime example with the possession. But then do you remember the TV show Passions?
Yes, yes,
They
yes, I
had a
do. That was
witch.
all over the place.
They
Yes,
had a talking doll. I
yes.
mean, all over the place with Passions. Um, One Life to Live, which was the show I was covering at the magazine, they had like, let's go back in time to the 1888 West, or there's a magical underground city called Eterna. And there's a lot of this stuff, and I don't know exactly how they managed to get away with it because soap operas are supposed to be very kitchen sinky and real life, but in an expanded way. So I found it fascinating that there were so many great examples. Days of Our Lives had a lot of them, and it wasn't.
Dynasty,
Oh,
because I teach tarot, or I taught tarot. I haven't done it in a while,
uh,
but there was an episode of Dynasty, the original Dynasty, and when they redid Dynasty, they still kind of used the same premise.
uh-huh.
But they have Joan Collins, Alexa, going to Italy, and she gets her cards read. And of course, she doesn't have the full regale on, but she's got the accent, the heavy accent, and she lays down the death card, and she's like, "He will expire." She's like, "What? He will expire." And I'm like, "Oh my
Doesn't that
God."
drive you nuts? Because it's like death doesn't mean death.
Exactly,
It
exactly.
means change.
It
It does not mean death.
change, rebirth, and it's my birthday card. Technically, it's my birth card. So it's like, but I mean, I sat there. I'm like, oh, I have to like take this and put it in my class because I want tarot and media. I talk when I teach it. I do all sorts of stuff, but that's part of it. So yeah, I mean, when you look at how cheesy they make those things, it's
Hmm.
ridiculous. But anyway.
Oh, yeah. Especially when it's close to your heart. You're like, I now have less respect for you because you've used the death card the wrong way. We needed a tower card, is what we needed.
Well, this is why you have people when you pull the death card, they're like, oh my gosh. It's like, no, no, slow your
Oh,
roll. It's
yeah,
okay.
exactly. So you're all right.
Only if there's a couple other cards, then it's only happened to me once with a couple other cards came up at the same time and
Mhm.
it played out that way.
Oh, geez. Okay.
So, but most of the time, 95% of the time, no.
Right. Right. Exactly. But this is the shorthand, the cheap shorthand that
Yes.
deviants.
Yes. So, is there anything that we did not talk about that you would like to add?
Oh, I'm sure there's many, many things we could still talk about, but the one thing I will mention in addition is that, so this is a weird year for me. I actually have three novels coming out, and we mentioned the follow-up to Tune In Tomorrow. We mentioned The Only Song We're Singing. In August will be a book called Leave No Trace, which also uses musicians at its core. But it's got so many weird things going on there. There's just a pair of musicians, one who's sort of like this Justin Bieber-esque kind of person, and his songwriter who go into the woods for a break, like to get away from the publicity.
Hmm.
And they end up encountering magical creatures and a woman who's grown up in the woods, and chaos ensues. There's a bear as well. I'm using the slogan, sometimes the bear finds you, you know. Um, so there's a lot going on with that book too, but it is also music based, or it has music as its at its core. So if you like The Only Song Worth Singing, the two of them are actually loosely connected. It's a they're in the same universe, but they're not the same characters. And there's a third book I'm hoping to write in that universe, which will tie everything together. But both of these books are completely standalone at the moment.
All right. Well, thank you, Randy, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a really great time. I love chatting with you.
I love chatting with you. Yes, I will say it. Randy's interview was interesting. Like I said, I love my job. It's one of those things where it's like I get to talk to people from different backgrounds that are fascinating, and to follow that linear line of writing to journalism to the entertainment industry to being able to go on tour with somebody for just a little bit to having those experiences to be able to take that and put that in a book and then mix it with the mystical. That's a gift. And I think sometimes we don't realize that if we take little bits of our life, and I'm not just saying in writing, but we'll use writing real quick for an example. If you take those little bits that have led you forward, that have led you on this journey, they help you build a world, they help you create a life. And I think one of the most fascinating things we can do is take that experience and make it something more. I often talk to my friends, not often, but in the past I did, that having the stepfather I had, the stepfather that wasn't so perfect, taught me how to be a better step parent. When I learned how to do one thing at a job, it ended up translating to something else. And it gave me information. So it's like, I'll use this. So when I was working bodily injury claims for the insurance company, I had to learn certain aspects of how things work with the body and how an accident may happen and all these little bits and pieces. Well, that translates for me into being able to write that scene. Knowing, taking care of my husband taught me how to pay attention for certain signs and certain health issues. And so I think if we looked at our life, that even though sometimes it may be total crap, there are bits and pieces that we can translate into making our own life better or learn from those mistakes that we make and translate those into creating the life we want. Sure, life is never going to be perfect, and you have to accept that. But if you can see where your journey is headed, at least even if it may not turn out exactly the way you want, but you can build a career and get over your fear like Randee did. She got past that critiquing stage, she got past that fear. And once she did, she was able to start publishing. And a lot of the times when we have screwed up, so we're going with that tangible thing of I screwed up, well, I don't want to make that mistake again. You pick yourself up, you keep going, and you keep dusting yourself off and moving through. One of the things I was going to do last season was release a podcast about the year that I had because it was insane. And there was so much fear when it came to me selling the house that I had with my husband. It took me 4 years to do it. But the day that I said, I'm going to do this, it took me less than 3 days to sell it. And that was insane. I put it on the market on Friday. By Sunday, when the first showing happened, by that evening, I already had an offer. And I waited 2 days. I waited till Tuesday to finally, because there was two more showings. But the whole fact of the matter is, once I released that fear, then the door opened up and then things started to move. So it's like you have to be able to step out, look around you. If there's a mistake or if there's any fear, face it, because sometimes that is exactly what is holding us back. And like for Randee, once she opened that door, she has found success as an author. She has, 3 books coming out this year. So that is an amazing feat. I've done it. Of course, now I've pulled my books back because they need rewriting and I'm not happy with it, but that's me. But she has a team, she has a publisher that's like, okay, these are ready, let's go. So get out of your own way sometimes. That's the best thing I can tell anybody is get out of your own way, because you know what? Fear is the smallest word that has the biggest roadblock for you. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed the show. Hopefully Randee comes back. You should pick up her book. Her book comes out on April 8th, and that's The Only Song Worth Singing. She's already got the book out, Tune In Tomorrow, which There is a little seriousness in there. We talked about it off air, but I think you should check it out. And if you love the podcast, leave a review. We would greatly appreciate it. And I'd like to thank you for tuning in. I also like to thank Rich Zai of Third Ear Audio for doing the audio, and Fast Susie for the intro and outro music. And most importantly, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in and listening, because you make it worthwhile. So, on that note, I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, whenever you choose to listen. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.